Welcome back to the world of Squid Games. It's hard to believe that it has been 3 years since we last saw this show, and what a better Christmas present for Netflix to give us than a Season 2, the 35th annual Squid Games. Yes, that's right. If you remember in Season 1, we learned that these games have been going on since 1988, and with this taking place 3 years after Season 1, it makes this the 35th Squid Game. And I don't know about you, but as much as I am loving this Season 2 story right now, I want more of this show and its world so badly. Dong Hyo-kwon, the creator of the show, said that Season 3 will be the end of the show. They shot Season 2 and Season 3 back to back, and Season 3 is set to come out sometime in 2025 this next year. I don't really know about you, but I'm not ready for that to be the end of Squid Games. I think it would be really cool to see a prequel show, giving us a glimpse at the first set of games and how they came to be. I think with great writers and directors, they could tell unique and engaging stories jumping forward in time 5 years or so and show us how the games have evolved since the very beginning. We could see young Il-nam as he created the games and found the sponsors and the very first contestants. We could eventually watch the 2016 games that In-ho won that led to him becoming the frontman eventually. There's so many opportunities for more content in this world. I mean, besides Stranger Things, this is Netflix's biggest IP. There's no way they're going to let it end with Season 3. There has been talks of a spin-off show taking place in the US, but that sounds like it could be a very big hit or miss to me. Because remember, the heart and soul of this show is Gi-hun. Trying to replicate one of the best ever shows Netflix has ever had would be so hard, it would almost be guaranteed not to be as good as the original. Now, if you remember 3 years ago when the first season ended, we left off with Gi-hun not only winning the 45.6 billion won, which is a little over 30 million US dollars, but also he found out that his peer, his friend, number 1, or Il-nam, wasn't actually killed off in the games like he thought, but instead his death was faked, and we learned he was the one that actually created the games in the first place. We see Gi-hun struggle to accept that the prize money he technically won wasn't even his because it was blood money. Each 100 million won was because a human being died to the games. He just couldn't bring himself to spend any of it, until finally we see him at the airport in a nice new suit with a new haircut, about to get on a plane to leave the country with his family until something catches his eye. It was the exact same man that lured him into the games, and he was recruiting new members for this year's games. All those deaths that were bothering him, there was about to be 455 more. He chooses not to get on the plane, and this season we get to watch him give every ounce of his soul into tracking down this recruiter in hopes that he would eventually be the first step in stopping the Squid Games from happening. But surely, in the last 32 years, Gi-hun hasn't been the first winner that's struggled with the reality of the games moving forward. And now with a large fortune in his hands, he has the resources to actually track down, find the games, and possibly bring them to an end. And I gotta tell you, I really love seeing everything before the games in Season 2. We got 2 full episodes following not only Gi-hun and his new workers searching for the recruiter, but also Jun-ho. Ever since finding his long-lost brother on that island, he hasn't stopped thinking about him. And it was only a matter of time before he bumped into Gi-hun. I was actually surprised at first that Gi-hun's search operation had been so unsuccessful for the last 2 full years. Besides keeping the show in real time with the release year of Season 2, I'm not sure why the search went on so long. But you gotta remember, as we know, there's only one person that recruits players for these games. What if he simply went to a different city to gather players for the last 2 years? Or what if he was recruiting elsewhere and was dealing with an entire different demographic of people struggling? The lead up to finding him and the chase and trying to capture him in the games that he made them play were so freaking intense. It was the most insane start to this season. The music was great, the actors were amazing. By the end of episode 1, our hearts were pounding. They really started Season 2 off with a bang. And surprisingly enough, only 5% of the people that watched the last video were actually subscribed. That's such a small number, guys. What are you doing? Just go down there and smash the button if you want to join everyone else in overthrowing the Squid Game so you don't end up like all the others. I don't know about you, but I have a ton of other questions about Season 2 and now Season 3 that I'd love to make videos on. With Season 3 being less than a year away and them literally stopping Season 2 in the middle of the most climactic scene of the season, there is so much to talk about about, so make sure you're subscribed. You're not going to want to miss those videos. One of the new things they did in Season 2 was instead of only focusing on Gi-hun's story before the games, they decided to give us a look at a couple other characters as well, planting the seeds of their stories before we ever see them in the games. In Season 1, all we saw was Gi-hun, and then 30 minutes into the first episode we're in the games. It jumped into it so fast, but with Season 2, not only do we fill in what's happened over the last 2 years with Gi-hun, but now we also need to revisit the biggest cliffhanger of last season, or cliff diver. Whatever, he was shot off a cliff, but now we learn not only did he survive, but he's also become a traffic cop. He's basically fallen down to the worst spot in the police force you would want to be in. They also address how he tried to go to the cops and tell them about the games, but just like last season, everyone thought he was crazy. It makes you wonder if they really do think he's crazy talking about these absurd sounding games, or if there's some possible corruption happening all the way at the top levels of the Seoul Police Department. But lucky for us, Jun-ho has taken it into his own hands and is looking for the island on his own. He's coincidentally using the same fishermen that pulled him out of the ocean and rescued him and brought him back to the city, and he's been helping him search for the island for free for the last 2 years. Yeah, I know that's a lot of red flags, but who knows, maybe it's just coincidence that he was in the middle of nowhere outside this mysterious island, and for some reason he just can't figure out where he was. Of course, this man is working for the management running the games, and it seems like the front man himself called him in and had him save his brother from drowning. And honestly, it was really cool to see In-ho, the front man's mercy and good side, come out at the end of Season 1 by choosing to shoot Jun-ho in a non-fatal spot, causing him to spin backwards and fall into the water, versus being gunned down by all those guards. And now seeing him have the fisherman rescue Jun-ho, as well as him joining forces with Gi-hun the whole season to win the games and eventually lead the rebellion, it definitely feels like they're laying the foundation for him too to eventually turn against the games or the higher-ups in the end. With the new backup frontman being introduced this season, it shows us there's already a ruthless killer waiting to replace him as if he was getting ready to retire or stop being the frontman for some reason. He actually steps in and we see him run the games while In-ho pretends to be a player just like Il-nam did in Season 1. Which also, this is so crazy that Gi-hun is most likely the first previous winner to actually return for the 3rd time to play in the games another year. He returned after they left in Season 1, but now after winning the finale, he has returned again. And the crazy part is that he was not once suspicious of any of the other players this year in the games. After becoming best friends with Il-nam and eventually betraying him to save his own life, sacrificing him and killing him, he thought, only to learn he survived his death in the games and played in them because he wanted to. He was bored with real life, and gambling was the only thing that, with all of his riches, he can't control. It's up to chance and odds. That's what the games are entirely about. But to me, it's just so hard to believe that after all of that, the thought didn't even cross Gi-hun's mind that any of these players could also secretly be someone running the games. Especially when another player immediately is the reason the games continue after the first vote and positions himself so close to Gi-hun early on. I mean, there was red flags, and he just chose to ignore them. Anyone working the games would know Gi-hun was a recent winner, which should have made him that much more cautious of anyone trying to befriend him that he already didn't know from his life before the games. But no, he just trusts everyone with no suspicions. And I mean, In-ho really committed to the bit, and he didn't even need to. I really loved that they let the audience, us the viewers, know who the secret player was that worked for the games. It doesn't have the same rewatchability of not knowing until the end, but it gives the games a whole new perspective we didn't get in Season 1, as we get to see him try to manipulate the games to continue on and be more entertaining for the VIPs, and ultimately to show Gi-hun that even when given the choice, some humans will still choose to play in the games rather than leave and return to real life where they have to deal with real consequences and all of their debts. And seeing In-ho commit to the bit for the entire season was really cool. At first, I wondered why he placed himself into the games after watching the first game, but seeing how much Gi-hun was going to disrupt this year's games, he had to do something. By putting himself in the games and befriending Gi-hun, he was able to learn of all of his plans and keep him from doing anything too crazy to derail the games further. But wait a second, he entered after Game 1, but as far as we know, after the majority was killed off because of the mass panic, Player 1, the real Player 1, was still alive. What happened to this player? Did the guards kidnap him after he survived the first game and send him to the incinerator and then sneak the frontman into the crowd? You're telling me that no one interacted with the original number 1? He didn't make any friends or talk to anyone that noticed that this new Player 1 is a little older and looks a little differently? I mean, I'm sure it's the least of the other players' worries, but I'm still curious. What happened to the real Player 1? Moving on, I loved seeing the frontman toy with Gi-hun in the games. It felt like in the second game, he wasn't a fan of how easy they made it through the first couple minigames and threw his game on purpose. We already saw how efficient he was with his demonstration of hand-to-hand combat he used to break up the fight. He probably was confident enough in his skills that even if Gi-hun failed the final minigame, since he was connected to him, he himself could complete the minigame in time using his foot to guide Gi-hun's foot to hit the sack. It seemed so intentional that he was just toying with them, keeping the game entertaining not only for the VIPs watching, but also for himself. Even on the carousel game, it seemed like he got way too into it and was having way too much fun playing these death games that he usually watches from a distance. Come to think of it, spending all those years watching all of these games, he already knew the way to win them. He knew all the most efficient strategies, but instead, he blended in as much as he could to just be another player and play the games like everyone else to avoid raising suspicion. And you know what? He did a really good job at it. I was shocked that he continued on all the way into the rebellion, gunning down his very own workers, some of which looked like they recognized him. I don't think any of them would have ever seen Frontman's face, but still, he got very close to helping Gi-hun reach the control room. Well, I guess some of the guards would have to know his face to make sure they didn't accidentally shoot him or let him die, just like they did with Il-nam in Season 1. There was so many failsafes in place to make sure that none of the games accidentally killed the old man. It's only safe to assume that they did the exact same for the frontman. And this just made me all the more excited to see how they're going to end the show. What happens when Jun-ho finds his brother, and is he going to be able to save him from his dark side? And I think this was the biggest problem with Season 2. It was this great new story that gave us so many things we wanted to see in Season 2, but it just ended so abruptly, and without marketing it as a part 1 of a part 2 season, everyone expected it to have a conclusive ending. And I'm not saying you can't have any cliffhangers to have a good ending. Season 1 showed us you could be conclusive and still leave some things up in the air until the next season. That's part of the way you keep people excited for the next installment. But this? Ending it in the middle of a scene was not the way to do it. I felt so disappointed and robbed of the last 7 hours. Don't get me wrong, I loved watching it. I thought the characters, the story, the games, the music, the intensity was great. And then the ending was so poorly done that I forgot all about of those great things it spent the last 7 hours investing in, and it just made me feel bleh and betrayed, like I wasted my time by expecting there to be some complete story here. Ever since Avengers did it with Endgame and Infinity War, it's become so popular to spend an entire movie getting halfway through a story and ending right at the climax, and I hate this. Endgame and Infinity War was the one exception I was okay with. All the others, the Fast and Furious, even the Spider-Verse, all of them was annoying and felt disappointing, ending the 2 to 3 hour movie you just watched in the middle of a reveal or something. Unless you know beforehand that what you're about to watch is a part 1, you are expecting a full story which includes a somewhat conclusive ending, and every time it ends in the middle of a scene after a big reveal and the credits roll, so do my eyes. I really wish they would just at the very least tell us ahead of time so we're not disappointed and we know what to expect. I can't help but feel like that's the bare minimum, and it saves us from throwing everything they worked so hard to build up over the whole movie or season out the window because it ended so abruptly. And now we have to wait who knows how long for Season 3. I love this season, but I really wish they just ended it on a better note. And honestly, I have a lot more questions about Season 2. If you enjoyed the Squid Games video, send this to a friend and comment what you thought of Season 2 and what you're excited to see in Season 3, and maybe I'll drop another one. Until then, I will see you in the comments. Peace.